Today, we are diving into one of the most, well, dramatic and just plain strange prophecies you'll find anywhere in the ancient world. It's all in the book of Ezekiel. We're talking about a story of prophetic street theater, a really stubborn king, and a warning that, you guessed it, was completely ignored, right up until it was way too late. So let's get into how this bizarre performance became an absolutely chilling prediction of real history. Seriously, just imagine this for a second. You look out your window and your neighbor is packing a single bag, like he's being forced to leave his home forever. A little weird, right? But then, as the sun goes down, he actually starts digging a hole through the side of his own house and crawls out. I mean, you'd probably call someone. You'd think he'd completely lost it. But for the ancient Israelites living in exile, this very performance was a final, desperate warning from God himself. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the strange performance itself. Then, we'll decode what it all meant. After that, we'll see how it was aimed squarely at a king, watch its shocking fulfillment in history, and finally, try to understand the purpose behind such a heavy judgment.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our story doesn't actually start in Jerusalem. No, it kicks off in Babylon, right in the middle of a community of Jewish exiles. We're talking around the year 593 BC. The prophet Ezekiel is already living as an exile. He'd been snatched from Jerusalem in that first big deportation back in 597 BC. But here's the thing. Back home, Jerusalem was still standing, and so many of the exiles were just clinging to this false hope that everything would be fine, that the city would be spared. It's in this climate of total denial that Ezekiel gets his marching orders. God's diagnosis of the people is, well, blunt. He calls them a rebellious house. He says they have eyes but refuse to see, and ears but refuse to hear. You see, it's not that they hadn't been warned before. Prophets like Jeremiah had been screaming this from the rooftops back in Jerusalem for years. The problem wasn't a lack of information. It was a stubborn, willful refusal to listen. So since words clearly weren't working, God tells Ezekiel to do something completely different. He's commanded to perform a silent, public drama, a living, breathing sign of exactly what was coming. And the instructions are so specific, it's wild. During the day, right where all his neighbors can see him, Ezekiel has to pack this tiny bundle of belongings, the kind of bag an exile would carry. Then, as evening comes, he has to dig through the mud brick wall of his own home, haul his bag out on his shoulder, and cover his face like he's in deep shame. Every single action is symbolic and just meant to be deeply unsettling. And guess what? It totally works. The performance is so bizarre, so out of the blue, that the community just can't ignore it. They come right up to him and ask the most important question: what in the world are you doing? The street theater did its job perfectly. It created an opening for the truth. So now that Ezekiel has everyone's attention, God gives him the explanation. And it turns out this whole performance has a very, very specific target. The prophecy, God explains, is all about the prince in Jerusalem. Now, this is a direct shot at King Zedekiah, the very last king of Judah. And what's really fascinating here is the word choice, prince instead of king. It's subtle, but it's a huge tell. It's a signal of Zedekiah's weakened power. He's basically a puppet king, and his time is just about up. And here's the bottom line. Ezekiel tells them, I am your sign. He's saying, everything I just acted out for you, this whole weird drama, it's a literal preview of what is going to happen to King Zedekiah and all the leaders left in Jerusalem. They are going to be ripped from their homes and dragged into captivity. The warning could not possibly be any clearer. Okay, now we get to the fulfillment, and this is where the prophecy smashes right into recorded history in the most stunning way. Years go by, and just as predicted, the Babylonian army breaks through the walls of Jerusalem. And what does King Zedekiah do? The book of 2 Kings tells us he and his soldiers try to escape, at night, through a breach in the city wall. It is an exact, literal replay of Ezekiel's act of digging through his own wall to flee. It's unbelievable. But that escape plan, yeah, it falls apart fast. Zedekiah gets out of the city, but he doesn't get very far. The Babylonian army chases him down and catches him on the plains of Jericho. From there, he's dragged to the city of Riblah to face judgment. And this is where the most tragic and precise part of the prophecy comes true. At Riblah, Zedekiah is forced to watch his own sons executed right in front of him. Then, his eyes are put out, he is taken to Babylon in chains, completely blind. Think about that. He would be brought to the land of Babylon, but, just as Ezekiel prophesied, he would never, ever see it. And all of this went down in the year 586 BC.
the year Jerusalem finally fell and the temple was utterly destroyed. The warning, given years earlier through this bizarre piece of prophetic theater, was fulfilled right down to the last horrifying detail. And the prophecy wasn't just about the king either. It also said that his supporters and his army would be scattered to the four winds. And that's exactly what happened. His entire fighting force was routed, and the whole leadership structure of Judah was systematically taken apart by the Babylonians. But this wasn't just about random destruction. The prophecy makes it really clear that even in a judgment this devastating, there was a very specific purpose behind it all. And they shall know that I am the Lord pops up again and again and again in the book of Ezekiel. The point was this: if you ignore the warnings, then the recognition of God's authority and the truth of his word will come through the fulfillment of the very judgment he promised. It was a hard lesson, but it was meant to be learned one way or another. And yet, in all of this, God promises not to just wipe everyone out. A small group, a remnant, would be preserved. And their purpose wasn't just to escape suffering. No, their purpose was to survive it and become living witnesses. They were tasked with telling the other nations the story of why this disaster happened, to declare their own failings and bear witness to the reality of God's judgment. And that little group, they paved the way for an eventual return. So, when you zoom out and look at the whole arc, you see this really clear pattern. The warning is given around 593 BC. It is fulfilled with shocking precision in 586 BC. And then decades later, in 538 BC, that promised remnant begins the long, long journey home, carrying the memory and the hard-won lessons of the fall. Which really leaves us with this final thought. The whole point of keeping survivors was so that they could tell the story. So, what exactly is the story they were meant to tell? Is it just a sad tale of destruction, or is it something more? A powerful testament to the fact that warnings, no matter how strange they seem, should always, always be heeded.